The Locked Door. Part 1. The Mysterious Key. Jack had always lived a simple life. He worked as a mechanic in a small town, fixing cars and making a quiet living. His life was peaceful, but there was something missing, something he couldn't explain. He felt as though there was a part of him that was locked away, hidden in a place he couldn't reach. One cold morning, Jack received a letter. It was strange because it wasn't from anyone he knew. The letter had no return address. Inside, there was a note that said, "This key will unlock a door in your life. Find the door and open it, but be careful. The secrets behind it may change everything." There was also a small, old-fashioned key inside the envelope. It was heavy and made of iron, with no markings on it. Jack stared at the key for a long time. He couldn't understand who would send him such a message or why. But as he held it in his hand, he couldn't shake the feeling that it was important. Unlock a door in my life? He wondered out loud. What does that even mean? He couldn't stop thinking about the key, and the words on the note played over and over in his mind. Find the door and open it. But where was the door? And what was he supposed to do when he found it? Jack spent the next few days trying to forget about the key, but it was impossible. The note, the key, the words, they haunted him. There was something inside him that wanted to know more. He had to find this door. At first, Jack thought about asking around. He considered telling his friends and family about the key, but then he hesitated. What if they thought he was crazy? What if it was all just a trick? No, Jack decided. This was something he had to figure out on his own. The next day, he started his search. He walked through his house, checking every door, every closet, and every room. There was nothing. Everything seemed the same. He even looked around his garage, where he worked on cars, but there was no sign of any special door. The more Jack searched, the more frustrated he became. Was this some kind of joke? Was the door just a metaphor? Or was he missing something? He couldn't stop thinking about it. He knew he had to find the door. It felt like the key was leading him somewhere, but to where? One evening, after a long day of searching, Jack sat in his living room, staring at the key on the table in front of him. His mind was spinning with questions. What was he looking for? And why was this key so important? What did it open? As he sat there, deep in thought, he noticed something strange. The key seemed to glow faintly in the dim light of the room. Jack blinked, thinking he was imagining things. But then it happened again. The key shimmered, almost like it was alive. Suddenly, Jack had a thought. What if the door wasn't something physical? What if the door was a part of his life? Something he had locked away, something he didn't want to face. Could the key be opening that door inside his mind, his heart? Jack shook his head. No. That's crazy. It's just a key, he whispered to himself. But deep down, he knew the truth. The key wasn't just a key. It was the answer to a question he had never asked. The door was there, hidden somewhere in his life. And now, with this key, he had to find it. Jack stood up, his heart racing. He didn't know what would happen when he found the door, but he knew he couldn't stop now. The key was calling him. He had to know what was behind the door, even if it meant facing the darkest parts of his past. But little did Jack know, the door he was searching for would change his life forever. Behind it lay secrets that he had buried deep within himself, secrets that could destroy everything he held dear. And now, with the key in his hand, Jack was about to open that door. Part 2. The Search for the Door. Jack's mind raced as he stepped out of his house, the key still tightly gripped in his hand. He had no idea where to start. The thought of opening a door that might unlock his past scared him, but at the same time, it felt like he had no choice. The key was pulling him toward something he didn't understand yet. He walked down the street, his footsteps echoing in the quiet morning air. His neighbors waved at him, but Jack didn't wave back. He was too focused on the key. What did it mean? What did he have to do? He knew he had to find the door, but where could it be? Jack decided to go to the one place that always made him feel calm. The old tree by the lake. He often sat there when he needed to think, and it had always been a place where he could clear his mind. Maybe sitting there would help him find the answers he was looking for. As Jack reached the tree, he sat down on the grassy ground, looking out over the lake. The water was still, reflecting the blue sky above. It was a peaceful sight, but Jack's mind was far from peaceful. He thought about the letter, the key, and the message. This key will unlock a door in your life. What if it was all just a dream? What if he was imagining things? But then he thought about the way the key had shimmered in the light. He couldn't deny it. It felt like something important, something that was meant for him. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath, trying to calm his racing thoughts. What do I do now? He asked himself. Where is the door? Suddenly, Jack heard a noise. It was soft at first, but it grew louder, like someone was walking toward him. He opened his eyes and looked around, but no one was there. The noise seemed to be coming from the other side of the lake. Jack stood up and walked toward the sound, his curiosity growing stronger with every step. As he reached the edge of the water, Jack saw something he hadn't noticed before. There, hidden behind some bushes, was a small wooden door. It looked old and worn, almost like it had been forgotten for years. The door was small, about the size of a cupboard door, and it had a simple lock on it. Jack's heart skipped a beat. Was this the door? The one the key was meant to open? He walked closer, feeling a mix of excitement and fear. His hand shook as he reached into his pocket to pull out the key. As soon as his fingers touched it, Jack felt a strange warmth spread through him. It was like the key had been waiting for this moment. With a deep breath, Jack bent down and inserted the key into the lock. It turned easily, as if the door had been waiting for him all along. Slowly, Jack pushed the door open. On the other side of the door was not a room or a hallway, but a narrow path that seemed to lead into a thick, dark forest. The air was cool, and a faint mist hung in the air, making everything look mysterious. Jack stepped through the door, feeling an overwhelming sense of uncertainty. He didn't know where the path would take him, but he knew that he had to keep going. The door behind him slowly creaked shut, and Jack felt a chill run through his body. It was like he had stepped into another world. One where the rules were different, where everything felt strange and unfamiliar. Jack walked along the path, his footsteps muffled by the soft earth beneath him. The trees around him were tall and thick, their branches twisting and reaching out like arms. It felt like the forest was alive, watching him, waiting for him to make a mistake. As Jack walked deeper into the forest, he began to notice strange things. There were old stones on the ground, covered in moss, and strange symbols carved into the trees. He didn't recognize any of them, but they made him feel uneasy. It was as if he was being led toward something important, but also dangerous. Finally, after what seemed like hours, Jack reached a clearing in the forest. In the center of the clearing was a small, ancient-looking chest. It was made of wood, with intricate carvings on its surface. The chest was locked with a heavy metal padlock, and it seemed to be waiting for him. Jack's heart pounded in his chest. Was this it? Was this what the key was for? He didn't know, but he couldn't stop now. He approached the chest, his hands trembling. He looked down at the key in his hand, then back at the lock. It seemed to fit perfectly. With a deep breath, Jack slid the key into the lock. He turned it slowly, and the lock clicked open. As the chest creaked open, Jack's breath caught in his throat. Inside, there was something small wrapped in cloth. Jack's hands shook as he reached for it. He unwrapped the cloth, and inside was a small old photograph. It was a picture of a young woman, standing in front of a house Jack recognized all too well. It was his childhood home. But the woman in the picture wasn't anyone he remembered. Her face was blurry, like someone had tried to erase her from the photo. Jack stared at the photograph, his heart racing. Who is she? He whispered to himself. And why does this picture exist? The more Jack looked at the photograph, the more his mind began to race. This woman, this stranger, was somehow connected to his past. But how? And why had the key led him here? Jack felt a heavy weight in his chest. He didn't know what was happening, but he knew one thing for sure. Opening this door had changed everything. The secrets of his past were beginning to surface, and they were far darker than he could have ever imagined. What was the key really for? What had he unlocked? And most importantly, what would he do with the truth when he finally discovered it? With the photograph in his hands, Jack stood in the middle of the clearing, knowing that the answers to these questions would change his life forever. Part 3. The Dark House. Jack stood there in the clearing, the photograph in his hands. His mind was a mess. He couldn't stop staring at the picture of the woman. Who was she? Why had the key led him here? And why was this photograph inside an old chest in the middle of a dark forest? The more he thought about it, the more confused he became. He carefully folded the photograph and placed it back inside the chest. He closed the chest, and for a moment, just stood there, not sure what to do next. The path he had been walking on seemed to stretch endlessly before him, but now everything felt different. He didn't feel the same excitement he had when he first opened the door. Now, there was a deep, heavy feeling in his stomach. Jack turned around and started walking back along the path. The forest was still silent, but it felt like something had changed. It was as if the trees and the air around him knew something he didn't. Every step Jack took felt like he was getting closer to something big, something that was waiting to be discovered. As he walked, Jack's thoughts raced. Could the woman in the photo have something to do with his past? He had lived in that house for most of his childhood, but he couldn't remember any woman like the one in the picture. His family was small, just his parents and his younger brother. There had never been anyone else in their home, at least not that he could recall. But the more he thought about it, the more he realized something important. The photograph wasn't just a picture of a stranger. It was a clue, a piece of a puzzle he didn't even know existed. He had to find out who she was and what she had to do with his life. When Jack finally reached the door again, he stepped back into the open world, away from the strange forest. The door slowly closed behind him with a soft click. For a moment, Jack just stood there, the key still in his hand. His heart was pounding. He had opened a door to something he hadn't been ready to face. He knew he couldn't keep ignoring it. The photograph, the chest, the key, they were all parts of something bigger, something that he needed to understand. And the only way to find out the truth was to follow the clues. Jack returned home, but everything felt different. He couldn't focus on anything. The television, the radio, even the quiet sounds of his home, all of it seemed distant, like he wasn't really there. His mind kept going back to the photograph. The woman in the photo seemed so familiar, yet so unknown at the same time. He needed answers, but where could he find them? Jack decided to visit his parents. They lived a short drive away, in a small house near the edge of town. He hadn't seen them in a while, and maybe, just maybe, they could help him make sense of the photograph. When he arrived at their house, he found his mother in the kitchen preparing dinner. She smiled at him, her face lighting up as she saw him walk through the door. "Jack, it's good to see you, honey. How have you been?" Jack smiled weakly, but his mind was elsewhere. He sat down at the kitchen table, feeling the weight of everything pressing on him. He didn't know how to start the conversation. "Mom, there's something I need to ask you about," he said, his voice quieter than usual. His mother looked at him with concern. "What's going on, Jack? You look a little off." Jack hesitated. He didn't want to worry her, but he knew he couldn't keep it inside any longer. "Do you remember the house we lived in when I was a kid?" "Of course," his mom replied with a smile. "That was a good home. Why do you ask?" Jack took a deep breath. "Did we ever have a guest or someone who stayed with us, a woman maybe?" "I'm asking because I found something. A photograph of a woman I don't recognize, and it was in a strange chest I found." His mother froze. Her face went pale, and for a moment, Jack thought she wasn't going to answer. But then, she sat down across from him, her hands shaking slightly. I don't know what to say, Jack," she said, her voice soft. There was a woman many years ago. She came into our lives for a very short time, but I never told you about her. Your father never wanted you to know. Jack's heart skipped a beat. Who was she, Mom? What happened to her? His mother looked away, as if she was trying to find the right words. After a long pause, she spoke again, her voice trembling. She was your aunt, your father's sister. But she wasn't like us. She had a different life, a different story. She was troubled, Jack. She disappeared a long time ago, and your father never wanted to talk about it. He thought it was better for you not to know. But I guess you have the right to know now. Jack was stunned. His aunt? But he had never heard of her before. His father had never mentioned her, and his mother had kept quiet about it too. Why? What had happened to her? Mom, where did she go? What happened to her? Jack asked, his voice desperate. His mother looked at him with sad eyes. I don't know, Jack. She left one day, and we never heard from her again. Your father never wanted to talk about it. He always said it was better to forget. Jack stood up, feeling a mix of emotions. His aunt, his father's sister, had been a part of their family, but no one had ever mentioned her. Now, the picture he had found in the forest made sense. The woman in the photo was his aunt. But where had she gone? And why was she connected to the mysterious key? Jack left his parents' house, feeling more confused than ever. The photograph was starting to make sense, but the deeper he went, the more questions came up. Who had sent him the key? And what did it all mean? He had unlocked a door, but it wasn't just a door to the past. It was a door to a mystery that was bigger than he could have imagined. And now, Jack had to decide whether he was ready to face the truth, no matter how dark it might be. Part 4. The Mirror's Secret. Jack sat in his car, staring out at the dark road ahead. His mind was filled with questions, but there were no answers. The picture of his aunt, the mysterious chest in the forest, and the strange key. All of it felt like a puzzle, but he had no idea where to begin. He thought about what his mother had told him. His aunt, a woman his father had never spoken about, had disappeared a long time ago. But why? And why had the key led him to her photograph? Everything felt connected, but Jack couldn't make the pieces fit. He decided to go back to the house where he grew up. The house had always felt like home, but now, with everything that was happening, it seemed like a place full of hidden secrets. Maybe there was something there that could help him understand what was going on. When Jack arrived at the house, he took a deep breath before stepping inside. The house was quiet. Everything looked the same as he remembered: old furniture, worn carpet, and the smell of the familiar wooden floors. But there was a strange feeling in the air, like something was waiting to be discovered. He walked through the living room, looking around for anything that might help him. He remembered playing here as a child, running through the rooms with his brother, laughing and shouting. But now all those memories felt distant, like they belonged to someone else. His heart was heavy, and his head was spinning with all the questions he needed answers to. Jack went up the stairs and into his old bedroom. It looked the same as it had when he was a child. His bed, the bookshelf, the old posters on the wall. But something was different. A small drawer in his desk was slightly open. Jack didn't remember leaving it like that. He walked over to the desk and pulled open the drawer. Inside, there were a few old papers, a pencil, and a small old key. Jack felt a rush of recognition. It looked exactly like the key he had found in the forest. The key that had started all of this. He stared at it for a moment, his hands shaking. How had it ended up here? He took the key and turned it over in his hand. There was nothing written on it. It was just a plain old key. But somehow it felt important, like it held the answer to all his questions. Jack knew he had to find the door it opened, the door that had been locked for so long. Jack's heart was pounding as he left his bedroom. He walked down the hall and into the attic. The attic was the one place in the house he had never explored much. It was dusty, filled with old boxes, and full of forgotten things. But something told him that the answers he was looking for might be up there. He climbed the stairs into the attic, the air growing colder as he reached the top. The attic was dimly lit by a small window, but Jack could still see the piles of old belongings. Old furniture, boxes of things his parents had kept, and random objects that didn't seem to belong anywhere. As he looked around, something caught his eye. There was an old chest in the corner, covered in dust and cobwebs. Jack's breath caught in his throat. He had seen this chest before. It was the same one from the forest. The same one that had held the photograph of his aunt. He walked slowly toward it, his hands trembling. Was this the door he had been looking for? Was this chest the key to the mystery? He kneeled down and tried to open it, but it was locked. Of course, it was locked. Jack felt around for the keyhole and then, with a sense of urgency, he took out the key he had found earlier. He inserted it into the lock, and with a small click, the chest opened. Inside, there were more photographs, old photographs, some of people Jack didn't recognize. But one photograph stood out to him. It was a picture of a house that looked like his, but it was older, much older. And standing in front of the house was a woman, his aunt. The same woman from the first photograph. Jack picked up the photo, his hands shaking. The house in the picture wasn't the one he had grown up in, but it was very similar. It had the same shape, the same windows, the same design. But this house was old, and it looked like it had been abandoned for years. The more Jack stared at the photograph, the more he felt like something was missing. What was the connection between this house and his aunt? Why was she standing in front of it? He turned the photo over, hoping to find some kind of clue, but there was nothing, just a blank back. Jack let out a sigh and sat down on the floor, feeling exhausted. He had so many questions, but no answers. But then, something strange happened. As he sat there, the room around him seemed to change. It wasn't like the walls were moving, but it felt like the air had shifted. The atmosphere was different, heavier, like something was waiting for him to understand. He looked around, and his eyes landed on the dusty old mirror that hung on the wall. Jack stood up and walked over to the mirror. His reflection stared back at him, but it looked different. For a brief moment, it seemed like he wasn't looking at himself at all. It was as if the reflection was showing him a different person, someone he didn't recognize. The figure in the mirror was blurry, and Jack's heart began to race again. He shook his head, trying to clear the strange feeling. It was just his imagination, he told himself. But deep down, he knew that something was wrong. Something was happening that he couldn't explain. Something that was tied to the key, the chest, and his aunt. And now, it seemed like he was getting closer to the truth. But the truth was more dangerous than he could have ever imagined. Jack left the attic and went back downstairs. The house was silent, but he felt like he wasn't alone anymore. The key had unlocked something, and now, there was no turning back. He didn't know what would happen next, but he was determined to find out. The mystery was deepening, and Jack was ready to face whatever came next. No matter how dark or dangerous it might be, the door to his past had been unlocked. But what would it reveal? Jack didn't know, but he was about to find out. Part 5. Unlocking the Past. Jack couldn't stop thinking about the mirror. It had felt strange, almost like something was trying to tell him something. He didn't understand why he saw that blurry figure instead of his own reflection. He felt like he was going crazy, but he knew deep down that it wasn't just his imagination. Something was happening, and he had to figure it out. The next morning, Jack woke up feeling exhausted. He hadn't slept well, his mind filled with unanswered questions. The key, the chest, the photograph of the house, and now the strange mirror, it was all connected, but how? He decided to go back to the forest. Maybe there was something he had missed when he first found the key. Maybe there was something else hidden there that could help him understand what was going on. Jack grabbed the key from his pocket, his fingers running over it as if it would give him some answers. He took a deep breath, put on his jacket, and headed out the door. The walk through the forest was quiet. The trees swayed in the wind, and the sound of birds chirping filled the air. It should have been peaceful, but Jack couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching him. The closer he got to the place where he had found the chest, the more nervous he became. What if he was being followed? What if he wasn't supposed to be here? Jack finally reached the spot in the forest where he had found the chest. He looked around, his heart beating faster. The place seemed so normal, just trees and dirt. But Jack knew something important had happened here. The chest, the key, everything. It had all started in this spot. He crouched down and looked around carefully, hoping to find something new. After a few minutes of searching, Jack noticed something unusual. There was a small stone, half buried in the ground, with strange markings on it. The markings looked like words, but they weren't in any language Jack recognized. His fingers trembled as he touched the stone, and suddenly he heard a noise, a low rumbling sound, like the ground itself was moving. Startled, Jack jumped back. The ground around the stone shifted, and to his surprise, the stone began to rise out of the ground. It moved slowly, as if it were controlled by some invisible force. Jack watched in shock, his eyes wide. What was happening? Was this some kind of trap? Or was it part of the mystery? The stone finally stopped moving, and Jack could see a small opening beneath it. The opening was dark, but it seemed to lead somewhere. His heart raced. Was this the door? Was this the place the key would open? Jack didn't hesitate. He took the key out of his pocket and walked slowly toward the opening. As he reached the stone, he knelt down and looked inside. The space was too small for him to crawl through, but he could see a small, locked box hidden inside the hole. It was old, made of wood, and covered in dirt. There was no doubt in Jack's mind that this box held something important. Jack tried to pull the box out, but it was stuck. He tugged at it, but it wouldn't budge. Then he remembered the key. The key he had found earlier was meant to unlock something. Maybe it could unlock this box. He slid the key into a small keyhole on the side of the box. The key fit perfectly, and with a small click, the box opened. Jack's hands shook as he lifted the lid. Inside the box there was a letter, old and yellowed with age. The letter was folded carefully, and the handwriting was clear and neat. Jack opened the letter carefully and read, "To my beloved niece, if you are reading this, it means the key has finally found its way to you. I have hidden many things over the years, things that no one should know. But now, it is time for you to understand the truth. The house in the photograph is not just a house. It is a place where dark secrets are kept. Secrets that could destroy everything. Be careful. Yours, Aunt Evelyn." Jack's heart skipped a beat. His Aunt, Evelyn, had known about the house, the key, and the darkness that surrounded it. But what did she mean by dark secrets? And what truth was he supposed to understand? The letter didn't explain everything, but it left Jack with more questions than answers. Suddenly, Jack heard footsteps behind him. He spun around, his heart pounding. There was no one there. The forest was silent again. He turned back to the box, but it had disappeared. The stone was back in place, and there was no trace of the letter or the box. Jack's mind raced. Had it all been a dream? Was it real? He stood up, feeling dizzy and confused. He didn't know what to believe anymore. Was this some kind of test? Or was it something more dangerous? He had no answers, but one thing was clear. The mystery wasn't over. It was only just beginning. Jack walked back to his car, feeling the weight of everything on his shoulders. The house, the key, the letter. None of it made sense. But he knew he had to find the truth. He couldn't stop now. Something was waiting for him, something in that house, and it was waiting to reveal everything. As he drove away from the forest, Jack's mind raced with thoughts of his aunt, the house, and the strange events that had been happening. The locked door was still out there, and Jack was determined to open it. He didn't know what he would find, but he couldn't turn back now. The truth was waiting for him, and he was going to find it, no matter the cost. Part 6. The Final Revelation. Jack arrived at the house as the sun was setting. The sky was painted with shades of orange and pink, but the house before him looked dark and cold. The tall, old building stood in silence, like it had been waiting for him. The front door, which had once been locked, now seemed to call to him. He could feel his heart pounding in his chest, but he knew he had to go inside. The mystery had been growing in his mind for so long, and now it was time to face it. He got out of the car and walked slowly toward the door. With each step, the air felt heavier, like it was thick with secrets. Jack stopped in front of the door and took a deep breath. He pulled the strange, unmarked key from his pocket. The key was no longer just an object. It felt like it had power. It was the key to everything. Jack inserted the key into the lock. The sound of the key turning was loud in the quiet evening. When the door opened, a rush of cold air hit him. The house was dark inside, the only light coming from the dim glow of the evening sky. But there was something else in the air, something that made Jack feel uneasy. It wasn't just the silence of the house. It was as if the house itself was alive, waiting for him to step in. He stepped inside cautiously. The floors creaked under his weight as he moved deeper into the house. His footsteps echoed in the emptiness. The walls were lined with old portraits, and the air smelled dusty and forgotten. Jack's eyes scanned the room, looking for any sign of what his aunt had warned him about. As he walked through the dark hallways, he found himself in a large room. The room was filled with old furniture, but there was one thing that caught his attention: a large mirror hanging on the wall. Jack's stomach twisted. It looked like the same mirror he had seen earlier in the forest. But this time, there was no blurry figure in the reflection. This time, the mirror was empty, except for one thing. A small note was placed at the bottom of the mirror, almost as if someone had left it there just for him. Jack walked up to the mirror and bent down to read the note. It was written in the same neat handwriting as the letter he had found in the forest. Jack, you've come this far, but you still don't know the truth. The key you hold does not just open doors. It opens memories. You must look into the mirror and face what you've been hiding. The past is waiting to be revealed. Only then can you truly open the door. With love, Aunt Evelyn. Jack's hands shook as he read the note. His mind raced with questions. Memories? What memories? He wasn't sure he was ready to face whatever lay in the mirror, but he knew he had no choice. This was the moment he had been searching for. He took a deep breath and turned to face the mirror. As he looked into it, his reflection slowly began to change. At first, it was just his own face staring back at him. But then, something shifted. The face in the mirror started to change, becoming blurry and distorted. Jack blinked, not sure what was happening. His heart beat faster. Suddenly, a figure appeared in the mirror. His aunt, Evelyn, but she didn't look like herself. She looked older, worn, and tired. Her eyes were filled with sadness, and her expression was serious. She spoke, but Jack could barely hear her over the pounding of his heart. Jack, you need to understand. The house holds secrets, but it also holds the truth. I did what I had to do to protect you from the darkness that lives here. But now it's your turn. You are the one who must unlock the door, not just to this house, but to yourself. The key isn't just for the door. It's for your heart. The reflection of his aunt faded, and Jack was left staring at his own image. He felt a strange sense of guilt, like he had been running from something for a long time. He realized that the house wasn't just a place of mystery. It was a place of memories. It held the truth about his family, about his past, and about the things he had buried deep inside himself. Jack stepped back from the mirror, feeling overwhelmed. The key in his hand felt heavier now, as if it had changed in some way. It wasn't just an object. It was part of him. The house had been waiting for him to find it, to open it, to understand it. He turned around and saw a door at the end of the hallway. It was old, covered in dust, but it looked different now. This was the door that had been locked for so long. Jack knew that this was the moment. He was ready to face whatever lay behind it. He walked toward the door, his hand reaching for the handle. As he touched it, he felt a rush of energy, like the door itself was alive. He turned the handle and pushed the door open. Beyond the door was a small, dimly lit room. Inside, there was a single chair and a table. On the table, there was a small box. Jack walked toward it, his heart racing. He had come all this way, and now the answers were within his reach. He opened the box, and inside, there was another letter. This one was different. It was written in his own handwriting. Jack, you've spent your whole life running from the truth, from the secrets you didn't want to face. But now, it's time to stop hiding. The past can't hurt you anymore. You have the power to unlock the door to your future. The key was never just for the house. It was for you. Jack stared at the letter in shock. It was a message from himself. The truth was clear now. The key, the house, the mirror. It had all been part of his journey to face the things he had been avoiding. The locked door wasn't just a physical door. It was a door to his own soul. Tears filled Jack's eyes as he understood what he had to do. He had spent so much of his life hiding from his own past. But now he was ready to face it. He wasn't afraid anymore. He had unlocked the door, and he had found the truth. As Jack stood there, holding the key in his hand, he felt a sense of peace wash over him. The darkness that had haunted him for so long was gone. The door had been unlocked, and with it, Jack had unlocked a new chapter in his life. He walked out of the room, the key still in his hand, and as he stepped outside, the sun had fully set. But for the first time in a long time, Jack felt light. He was no longer trapped by the past. He had unlocked the door to his future. And with that, the mystery was over. That's the end of the story. If you enjoyed the story, please like, share, and subscribe for more exciting tales. Check out our other videos and share your thoughts in the comments. Stay tuned for the next adventure. Thanks for watching.